The World to Come. The Restored Church of God presents David C. Pack, answering life's greatest questions straight from the Bible and announcing the wonderful good news of the world to come.
The global economy is in the worst crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Despite unparalleled affluence in the Western world, personal and corporate bankruptcies are soaring. So is consumer credit. Millions are losing jobs. More millions, their homes. The U.S. national debt is measured in trillions of dollars. Headlines of credit fraud, identity theft, and corruption fill the news. Events are spinning out of control. All of this is unnecessary if you have God's keys to financial prosperity. Let's consider some sobering statistics. Since 2007, the economic crisis has erased a staggering $50 trillion in wealth around the world. The world's largest economy, the United States, is now more than $12 trillion in debt, and this debt is growing by about $4 billion daily. This amounts to a $39,000 bill for every United States citizen, or over $111,000 per taxpayer. Some expect the debt to be almost $14.5 trillion after the next fiscal year, which means a growth of additional billions on top of the $4 per day next year. Such debt can never be repaid. Tragically, most nations of the West are being crushed by impossible debt. Catastrophe now looms, and in the case of America, here is why. The United States expects to receive an estimated $2.19 trillion in tax revenue in 2009. However, this estimate continues to shrink. Projected spending is at $3.94 trillion for 2009. This number continues to rise. Now suppose these estimates represented the spending of an American family of median income. Such a family would take in $50,303, the 2008 estimate, but be planning to spend $90,042 while already carrying more than $275,000 in debt. Individual families would not do this, or if they tried, would go bankrupt before it could happen. But governments can print money. Such deficit spending is unsustainable, and the national debt is projected to top $18.6 trillion in 2014 and $24.5 trillion in 2019, more than double the present. Now understand that just a small 1% interest rate increase will raise the interest payment from $200 billion to over $800 billion each year. But this is only true if the deficit did not rise. Incidentally, many think all these projections to be very conservative. They will likely be much worse. No thinking person believes such overspending can continue without end. Further, the addition of expensive new government programs and exotic new kinds of taxes will only greatly exacerbate the problem. America will not stop spending because it is conditioned to believe it can have anything it wants. It need never deny itself. A country this big, this great, and one with such a rich history cannot fail. This thinking is tragically wrong. What world empire with half America's problems ever survived? The economies of America and other nations of the West will soon collapse into full-blown bankruptcy. This will happen, although things could temporarily get a little better. Various individual states will in fact likely precede this country into bankruptcy and thus hasten the overall collapse. Of course, nature abhors a vacuum, and a European-based world government will step in to fill America's abdication as global leader. This cannot now be far away. The world as you know it, including your life, and I mean all aspects of it, will change beyond your wildest imagination. So far, we've only discussed government debt. Private debt from loans and credit cards amounts to an additional $54,000 for every American, compared to an average savings of only $2,700. Since 2007, $7 trillion has been lost in the United States stock market and $6 trillion in its housing market. These are devastating losses to people's investments, including stocks, bonds, retirement plans, employee stock ownership, and home values. Hopes and dreams crash daily. Employment is now shrinking at the fastest rate since the Great Depression. Unemployment is now double-digit in the United States, and this does not include the discouraged who have given up looking. Many other countries are much worse. The combination of exploding debt and unemployment is hitting home. In 2009 alone, well over 1 million Americans declared bankruptcy, with more and more families also winding up jobless and in despair, facing abject poverty. This problem is worldwide. Many well-educated middle-class people now live on unemployment or welfare and food stamps, having never thought this could happen to them. Tent cities are springing up across America. Thousands are living in cars, and growing numbers now live in sewer systems. The combined budget deficit and weakening dollar threatens to introduce hyperinflation, ruin the finances of its citizens, and totally destroy America's economy. China, Japan, Germany, and other creditor nations are deeply concerned about investing more money in a bankrupt country. If they either pull out of American investments or call in their loans, the consequences will be disastrous. The world's second richest man, Warren Buffett, declared the U.S. economy has fallen off a cliff. Most troubling for this superpower, long the engine of the world's economy, may be the ongoing woes in its banking system. In 2008, 25 banks collapsed. In 2009, this may multiply 6 times. What started with subprime mortgage losses has now grown into a full-blown financial crisis. U.S. banks have lost many, many billions of dollars, and this will grow much higher. No one knows how much and thus where it ends. America's economic problems have ignited a global firestorm. Several European and Asian countries are also in recession. Many face shrinking economies, big deficits, mounting debt, unstable currencies, and rising unemployment. Financial markets are unraveling with a speed not seen since the crash of 1929. To compound matters, increasing economic, health, and hunger crises in third world nations are adding to the first world economic burden. As leaders scramble for solutions, deep fear pervades the world's corridors of power. All of this threatens to destroy the global economy. Attempting to solve the crisis, leaders are calling more often for a unified economic system. Some now suggest one currency, one economy, and one world government. Understand, the world economic outlook is grim and growing darker daily. In time, this will affect you. How does one escape what is coming? It is important to first understand the origins, the causes of today's economic distress. The crisis began with the so-called credit crunch, the reduction in the availability of loans. Banks became reluctant to lend to individuals, businesses, and other lenders. Banks traditionally operated by taking deposits from customers and lending to those seeking loans. The difference between the interest rate paid on deposits and the higher one charged on loans, the spread, was profit. If customers defaulted, banks were liable to depositors for payment. They held the risk on the books. It was their responsibility. It was therefore in a bank's interest to carefully screen customers before lending. The customer needed a good job and a sizable down payment. This conservative approach enabled banks to be sound and highly profitable for decades. In the 1990s, banks changed their way of operating, seeking ever higher profits to satisfy shareholders and to secure executive bonuses, they decided they could make even higher profits if they loaned more. Careful screening of applicants stopped. Customers who previously never qualified under standard lending procedures, subprime customers, were aggressively targeted as a lucrative source of income. Loans were provided to people with no income, no job, and no assets, so-called ninja loans. Other sweeteners were provided, such as no down payment and interest-only payments. Those who approved these loans were no longer attached to the risk of default and were handsomely paid for their efforts. The subprime mortgage market became a ticking bomb waiting to explode. Two developments have played a significant role in the onset of the current crisis. The first was deregulation of the U.S. financial services industry with the 1999 repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. Carefully crafted during the Great Depression to control stock market speculation, Glass-Steagall prevented retail and investment banks and insurance companies from owning each other. With the repeal, huge financial services conglomerates rapidly formed, combining these types of financial institutions. Industry behemoths such as Citigroup and J.P. Morgan were born. This meant that retail banks seeking ever higher profits could dive into high-risk speculative ventures through ownership of or being owned by investment banks. This brought disaster in 1929. The second change was the low interest rate policy pursued by the Federal Reserve. These rates encouraged banks to target subprime customers with variable rate mortgages. They offered initially low teaser rates that would reset upwards in 2 or 3 years. With home prices rising, customers took the bait, believing that when the reset arrived, they could refinance at affordable rates. Many mortgage brokers misrepresented terms and conditions to eager customers who were themselves providing fraudulent information. Many banks did not bother to check the information. Predatory lending invited predatory borrowing. Banks then sold risky bonds as safe investments to unsuspecting investors. Rating agencies, paid by the banks, rated these bonds, those with subprime components, as safe, even giving some the highest rating. With big, steady annual increases in real estate prices, builders nationwide went on a building spree. This created a sense of easy money, something for nothing. In their greed, many scammed the system. This does not count the many others who were outright corrupt and scammed people in the usual ways. And of course, predatory lawyers are now having a field day at every turn. The crisis began slowly in mid-2007. Due to a glut of homes for sale, housing prices fell moderately. But the scales were tipped as the first round of rate resets was coming due. Faced with exploding payments, falling prices, and inability to refinance mortgages, millions defaulted. Confronted with higher payments and on mortgages greater than the home's value, owners began abandoning their mortgages, many simply turning in their keys. Rising numbers feel no moral obligation to fulfill what they promised to repay, believing it better to just walk away. This is in stark contrast to years ago when borrowers felt an obligation, a duty to pay off loans. With moral values disintegrating nationwide, many lack the fiscal responsibility, the character of previous generations. As the crisis intensifies, mortgage defaults are multiplying, and everyone is on the hook. Monoline insurance companies have suddenly become liable for multiple billions in debt. Investors have been left holding bonds that will never be repaid. Banks are finding it difficult to sell additional bonds as investors have backed out of the market, leery of poor investments. The bank's fee income has dried up, leaving them with massive capital deficiencies. Thus, banks have sharply reduced lending to each other and to the public, fearful that loans will go unrepaid. Evidence is clear that shock waves from the crisis are being felt in other sectors of the economy. Liquidity is drying up and less money is available to finance commercial loans. The credit crunch is pushed beyond retail banking and now affects major business deals and commercial real estate. Municipal bonds that fund cities, colleges, and hospitals, once considered safe investments, can no longer easily find buyers. As more loans reach interest rate resets, more defaults will occur. The crisis will deepen. A fast-moving financial tsunami now approaches the shores of the world economy. I repeat, it is coming. The main motivating factors behind the crisis were greed and covetousness. Human nature has been accurately described as vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed. Understand, banks were greedy for ever higher profits. So were investors who took foolish risks for higher return on investment. And greedy individuals sought loans they could not repay to purchase material goods they coveted but did not need and could not afford. Of course, used cautiously and sensibly, credit is not wrong. It can permit the purchase of a car, home, or an education. Simple lack of self-control drives many into bankruptcy. Impulse buying has turned the loan industry into a thriving business. Credit is now used for luxuries, leaving little to show for it except the monthly bill. Obsession with material goods is fueling, in fact, supercharging the mounting debt crisis. People now routinely spend more than they make. They want the best clothes, newest gadgets, and fanciest cars. Keeping up with the Joneses and everyone else is doing it drives them. Jesus Christ warned, "Beware of covetousness, for a man's life consists not in the abundance of the things which he possesses." Do any still believe this? When unhappy or discouraged, many people go shopping until they feel better. Ironically, existing debt often brought the unhappiness, so the cycle continues. The result? Governments, financial institutions, and millions of citizens are all sliding toward bankruptcy. The present generation is very different from those of the past. Many, in fact most, now live solely for pleasure, comfort, gain, and entertainment. Personal responsibility and character building have almost disappeared. So many reflect, I want a lot, and I want it now. The Apostle Paul foretold all that is happening. Notice, this know also, yes, know this, that in the last days perilous or dangerous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, false accusers, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, there is plenty of religion around, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Make no mistake, as trends and conditions degenerate, violence will ensue, and in a big way. Uprisings, riots, and tumults will increase in number and severity. So will violent crime, as the increasing number of desperate people take desperate action in an attempt to save themselves at all costs. With this, the confusion of people asking, what do we do? Where do we go? Who do we listen to? Will grow beyond anything ever before seen. The cacophony of fearful uncertainty will be deafening. Now back to the subject of finances. Differing opinions on why the personal debt crisis and how to take control of your finances fill newspapers, magazines, books, and radio talk shows. But financial counselors offer advice that misses the crux of the problem. With so many experts presenting theories so often contrary to what other experts say, whose advice should be followed? So then, where can people find real solutions to real problems? The answer is in the Bible, God's instruction manual for mankind. Just as manuals exist for how to operate complex machines, the Creator God included a manual for the most complex creation ever made, human beings. Only by carefully following its guidelines, the immutable laws in this manual, can humanity achieve success. Think of the following. God has created laws to govern every aspect of His creation. Just as the laws of gravity and inertia govern portions of it, God has ordained laws that govern all aspects of money matters. By following them, people can ensure financial security. Most just do not understand that laws govern every action in life. The law of cause and effect, where actions always bring reactions, applies to finances. There is a way, a direct path to financial freedom. Jesus explains this. Notice, I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Before entering this path, a choice must be made. Almighty God revealed this choice to ancient Israel. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your seed may live. God will not force anyone to follow His ways. The choice is simple. Obeying Him leads to blessings and happiness. Disobedience leads to misery and unhappiness. Like the Israelites, many refuse God's warnings. They ignore the fact that by not following His laws, bad effects will come. Through man's rebellion, unhappy lives result, with none having any idea why. The same is true with God's financial laws. Be honest. Admit you spend much time thinking and talking about money. For most, the money struggle is constant. The pressure can seem unbearable. Just the stress can drive away the happiness and peace everyone seeks. The Bible contains many practical, helpful points about finances. Some mistakenly assume God believes money is evil and that Christians should be poor. They associate prosperity with the lustful, sinful lifestyles of the wealthy, holding the belief that humble Christians must go without to demonstrate true Christianity. This is wrong thinking. 3 John verse 2 also reveals that God wants His people to live a prosperous, healthy life. Unless one's finances are in order and well managed, this is impossible. God has appointed you steward of your finances or your families and commands that you do this correctly. The Bible contains valuable lessons that help one practice successful stewardship. King Solomon, the wisest man ever, said, "Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Work hard, but diligence must accompany hard work." Solomon also wrote, "See you a man diligent in his business, he shall stand before kings." This is an amazing verse. Could you ever believe this might be you? Then remember this. The desire accomplished through diligent hard work is sweet to the soul. Everyone enjoys completing tasks. This is sweet to the soul. Building certain principles into your character will ensure you function at your peak, managing your finances. Many now face the fearful reality of losing their job. The majority of these still do not budget and save. As spending and standards of living rise, family saving has dropped, and drastically. The result? Millions are on the brink of financial disaster, only a couple paychecks from the street. Before a purchase, ask, do I need this? Or do I just want it? Can I do without it? Impulse spending is the product of a generation lacking in strength and character, and is the accelerant bringing the mountain of debt now burying so many. Successful businesses run on budgets. So do successful households. Most never discover they are spending unwisely. They constantly spend and waste without knowing where their money went or what purpose was served. Here is a helpful booklet, Taking Charge of Your Finances. It offers instruction from God's Word as well as practical, common sense advice you can use. Now for the greatest key to financial prosperity. While consumer, corporate, and national debt are now monumental, another far greater debt has been ignored. This one is toward God. Mankind has been stealing from Him for 6,000 years. God declares, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, and the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof." God owns everything. So says your Bible. He designed, created, and maintains all things. This sets the stage for vitally important knowledge. Everything people take for granted as theirs really belongs to God. He has permitted man to use His planet and His resources. He allows us to be His stewards. All will one day give account of how they managed what was never theirs. God commands that we not steal from Him, yet most do. How? Notice, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed you? God's answer, in tithes and offerings. You are cursed, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring you all the tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. God only asks for a tithe, 10% of what one makes, plus offerings, and lets you keep the remaining 90%, although that still belongs to Him. He challenges skeptics to prove His promise of blessing the tithe payer. Again, most Western nations are staggering under impossible debt. There is a reason. So are millions of people. There is a reason. Terrible national punishment now lies just ahead for the world's greatest nations because hundreds of millions of individuals have stolen from God and do so every day. Understand, the World to Come program does not ever take political positions. Enough others do that. This is not our purpose, and we never do it. Paul wrote that God's people do not entangle themselves in the affairs of this life. This includes the ineffective governments of men. Voting for better politicians is not going to solve what are insoluble problems. These national and individual troubles are consequences of nations and peoples disobeying God, not of merely bad politicians or wrong government policies. Do not be among those who blame the government instead of human nature, including your own. But some argue, I can't afford to tithe. God says otherwise. You cannot afford not to tithe. He also blesses generous givers. No one has the power to give as God does. While many search for ways to stretch their income, the most unlikely way is the only way to do this. Thousands are learning God's tithing system works. Enforced for millennia, this system brings success. Return to God a small portion of what is actually His. He agrees to bless you more than you can imagine. Do not wait for financial ruin. Learn to be a steward and obey God's financial laws. Let God's promise work for you. Here is another booklet you need. End all your financial worries. You will be so very glad you read it. There is an entire church that God is blessing because it knows and obeys His tithing laws, as well as all the other laws and truths in His Word. You can write us to learn more about it. It is in fact tithes and offerings that make it possible for you and millions of others to hear this broadcast and to read the kind of free literature just offered. Financial collapse will come for the West only after the work of this church, preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God to all nations, is complete. God's true servants will then be protected from the horrible punishment that will follow. After the punishment, The corrupt governments and economies of men will be replaced by the perfect, marvelous government of God. This ultimate New World Order will not only teach individuals how to manage their personal finances, but also their entire lives. Do not become activists by marching on the Capitol or by writing your representative about today's mushrooming political, economic, and social problems. Your efforts will be in vain, and in fact, these fight God's purpose, which is to teach all peoples that they should have obeyed Him. You will find our booklet, Should Christians Vote, eye-opening. Finally, to better understand what is soon going to happen and why, read our extensive book, America and Britain in Prophecy. I urge you, obey God's tithing command and practice good financial stewardship. Then reap the benefits. Until next time, this is David C. Pack saying goodbye, friends.
This program was made available by Restored Church of God members and donors from around the globe. Explore our vast library of literature and other World to Come programs, which are all made available free of charge. To learn more or to find a local congregation, contact us to receive a personal response from a minister. The World to Come. The Restored Church of God presents David C. Pack.
The continent of Europe is in its worst crisis since World War II, one which threatens to destroy it. Think of headlines describing riots, violence, debt, entitlement cutbacks, banks, and bailouts. Long-established financial institutions are in trouble. Millions are unemployed with little hope of a job, and millions of jobs are at risk. More and more lives are simply shattering. Extreme social unrest is brewing. Angry, frustrated people are taking to the streets in violent protests against their governments, some of which have already fallen. Others are faltering. Entire nations face bankruptcy. The existence of the European Union hangs in the balance. Leaders are frantically searching for solutions, but to no avail. Europe is facing financial Armageddon. Will it survive? And how will the crisis ultimately affect the world? Europe will come together. The stage is rapidly being set with economics the catalyst for what is coming. The Bible has much to say about where this is leading. Everything that occurs on planet Earth is subject to a great unseen law, that of cause and effect. For every cause, there is one or more effects. Most people can see these effects, good or bad, but cannot trace them back to their origin, the cause that produced them. Europe is suffering from a host of effects, mostly bad. There are causes behind these effects. This broadcast examines the causes, the why of Europe's financial problems. Once you understand this, you can know where Europe is going. You can know how conditions, trends, and events will end. Europe is on a collision course with prophecy, but some background is necessary. The situation in Europe is nearly apocalyptic, and the stakes have never been higher. Many European nations simply cannot repay their debts, while at the same time their economies are slowing and tax revenue is decreasing. Worse, it is harder and harder to borrow more money. With giant debt loads hanging over these countries, Europe is running out of options. Analysts now warn of impending bank failures. According to one executive at a major global bank, if anyone thinks things are getting better, then they simply don't understand how severe the problems are. First is the growing distrust between banks, which are withdrawing deposits from one another and placing them with the European Central Bank, the ECB. Deposits there are at an all-time high of 905 billion euros. And many banks are becoming dependent on funding from their own central banks, so-called taxpayer-funded zombie banks. There is a mammoth 115 billion euro capital shortfall in the Eurozone's banking system. Banks have run out of proper forms of collateral needed to finance short-term loans and are instead digging into their gold reserves, a last-ditch emergency option. A collateral crunch lies ahead. Europe's financial system is so unstable that few experts any longer believe the European Union, the EU, has the funds to address the bank's problems. Even if the bailout funds were raised to €1 trillion, some warn this would only help Italy and Spain, just 2 of 27 EU members. What happens when other countries need bailouts? Europe's banks are facing a crisis of immense proportion. A collapse of at least one major European bank is more than a possibility, it is imminent. When this happens, Europe's financial sector will plunge into chaos because Europe's economies are already teetering on the edge. Growth is stagnant and some economies are shrinking. Again, countries are falling deeper into debt as tax revenue is insufficient and borrowing costs increase. Italy's borrowing rate is nearing an unsustainable 7%. Greece's, Ireland's, and Portugal's are way over 7%, with Greece's at over 20%. Several countries have unemployment rates over 10%, with some over 20%. Several have over 20% unemployment rates among youth. With jobs vanishing and others threatened, labor unions are on the march. In certain countries, relations between governments, capital, and labor are very bad and growing worse. At Europe's time of greatest need, its leaders hold summit after summit with little decisive action resulting. Europeans are searching for a champion, a bold, confident, courageous leader with the vision to deliver them from their troubles. While little consensus has been made about proposed solutions, most agree on one thing. Europe faces its darkest hour since the Second World War. Consider just some European countries and their challenges, starting with Greece. As of early 2012, Greece's debt stands at 340 billion euros, by far the largest debt in the history of this nation of only 11 million. This equals a staggering 31,000 euros for every Greek man, woman, and child. In 2010, Greece received a 110 billion euro bailout. Yet this was not enough. So a similar-sized bailout was agreed upon, but the money has not yet been delivered. Investors still fear that even the latest bailout will not cover Greece's debts, which seem to be a bottomless pit. If Greece runs completely out of money, French and German banks will be stuck with billions of euros in bad loans. These would then need a bailout by their governments. And America can't help because its debt is today worse than Greece when size is factored in. Investor confidence in Greece is so low its bonds are considered junk. This means the global financial community believes there is a high likelihood Greece will default. If so, the impact on Europe would be catastrophic. Next is Ireland, which saw the collapse of its banking system after bad real estate investments. The government took over the country's largest banks in an attempt to save them, with the bailout amounting to 85 billion euros. This was followed by the Irish government passing the toughest budget in its history. Yet more Irish bailouts are almost certain. Then comes Portugal. Its shrinking, uncompetitive economy has severely reduced government tax revenue. This forced its prime minister to resign. To get a 78 billion euro bailout, the new government passed tough austerity measures. This led to mass protests. Citing Portugal's worsening economy, ratings agencies have cut its economic forecast 4 times since 2009. Like Ireland, more bailouts will almost certainly be needed. But these countries are tiny compared to much larger Spain and Italy. Spain's once booming real estate market has collapsed. Its banks have been left with a load of bad debt. Many are in serious trouble, leading to a recession in which the unemployment rate has skyrocketed past 20%. Almost 50% of young Spaniards are not working. Disillusioned with the lack of prospects, many are emigrating abroad, particularly the skilled and educated, the ones the country can least afford to lose. Spain's borrowing rate has reached record highs, forcing its government to adopt austerity measures. Spain's economic outlook has been cut twice since 2009. The biggest concern is Italy, the fourth largest economy in Europe, with the highest debt load. Coupled with this, its economy is stagnant, and it is being charged 6% to borrow money. This is an astronomical rate for such a large nation, the seventh largest economy in the world. Germany only pays 0.25%. If trends continue, it is only a matter of time before Italy cannot pay its debts. If a bailout is required, no country in Europe or even its central bank could afford it. The same with Spain. Yet Italy and Spain are seen as too big to fail. Other nations are suffering similar economic distress, with the contagion spreading across the continent. Huge pressure has been put on the euro, which is close to collapse as investors lose confidence. When the euro was first established, its architects never imagined such a dire situation. What happened? Some review of the euro's history is helpful. It was established in 1992 in a treaty agreed upon in Maastricht, the Netherlands. At that time, all but 3 member nations decided to join. In 1999, the euro was created. In 2002, coins and notes came into circulation. Over time, other nations joined the EU and adopted the euro. The system progressed relatively smoothly until 2008, when the global economic crisis hit. Europe's leaders implemented a 200 billion euro stimulus budget to boost growth, but the crisis lingered. In 2009, the EU asked Ireland, Spain, France, and Greece to reduce their large deficits. In late December 2010, Greece shocked the financial markets by admitting to debts of 300 billion euros. To put this into perspective, Greece's debt was 113% of GDP. The crisis spread to larger European economies in 2011, such as Spain and Italy, whose borrowing costs rose sharply. To calm investors, Spain passed a measure to limit future deficits. Italy passed an austerity plan with a goal of a balanced budget by 2013. To further buffer the crisis, the EU established a 500 billion euro bailout fund called the European Financial Stability Facility, or EFSF. This fund financed the Greek and Portuguese bailouts, but it was too small to bail out larger countries, and much of the fund is gone. The EU as a whole forecasted growth of only 0.2% for the second half of 2011. But the private sector shrank for the first time in 2 years. The situation is so grave that the EU head, José Manuel Barroso, stated that Europe faces its greatest challenge ever. Some wonder, why cannot European governments simply print money to repay debt? Let's understand. Governments typically raise money by issuing bonds. These are essentially IOUs to interested investors whom the government promises to repay at a stated interest rate, with the main amount to be repaid at the bond's date of maturity. Like stocks, investors can trade bonds. If they do not like a country's prospects, they will sell that government's bonds, driving the price down. If investors have less confidence in a country, the country's borrowing rate increases. This is because investors see it as a riskier proposition. But usually a country has some control over its currency. For example, it can print more money through a central bank to pay debt. This ability also gives the nation power to devalue its currency to increase the competitiveness of its economy. This puts individual countries largely in control of their destinies. Let's see how this works. Take a country with large debt. Its government orders the central bank to print a lot of money to pay off its debt. This explodes the country's money supply and reduces the value of its currency. The principle of supply and demand is at work. The higher the supply, the lower the value, and vice versa. Because investors do not like the country's level of debt, they also sell its currency, further worsening its value. This reduces the value of the country's exports, making them more competitive internationally. Its businesses can then sell more products and services and make more money. This process kickstarts the economy, leading to businesses growing and generating jobs. The result is more income to tax and thus a higher government revenue stream. The government can start new projects, expand others, and pay its debt. Having this control over its currency gives a government tremendous leverage in managing its finances. However, this is not the case with Eurozone governments, nations which have adopted the euro. These do not have their own central banks. The Eurozone only has the European Central Bank, the ECB. Individual nations have fallen into what some European politicians call the euro straitjacket. Countries tied together under just one bank represents an enormous problem. Consider, if a Eurozone country is in economic trouble, their bonds become less attractive to investors. This is because of the country's reduced ability to repay the bonds. Therefore, investors sell them. This further lowers their value and attractiveness, reducing the government's ability to raise money through selling bonds since investors buy fewer. Investors move their funds to nations with stronger economies. For example, investors dump Greek bonds to buy German bonds. When the country's bonds become less desirable, it must raise the interest rate it pays investors to make them more attractive. Therefore, instead of being able to raise more money at low interest rates and reduce debts, they must pay more money in interest, thus increasing their debts. This cycle is vicious. Struggling, debt-burdened countries are trapped inside the euro with no way to control their destiny. Money simply flows within the eurozone from strong economies to weak ones. Without ability to manage the value of their currency or print more money, the economic condition of debtor nations only grows worse. This is where Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Spain, Italy, and other debtor nations find themselves today. During the boom years, these nations lived beyond their means, borrowing large sums of money. With their economies in recession, they're unable to borrow more at low rates. They are instead told, reduce borrowing, raise taxes, and cut spending. But this is the very thing driving them into recession. In turn, this drives up unemployment, resulting in more benefits paid and fewer incomes to tax. Never mind the resulting civil unrest, riots, and violence from angry peoples unwilling to lose entitlements, who are unwilling to control their selfishness and laziness in pursuit of ridiculously early retirement, as well as other government benefits they have long suckled upon. It is blind greed that demands the right to receive money that future generations could never repay. In the end, the current policy is self-defeating. These countries are trapped in a death spiral that threatens to bring down Europe and even the very global economy. Today, the foundation of the world's financial markets is crumbling. European leaders are desperately trying to save their system. In meeting after meeting, summit after summit, they try to find a way out of the abyss. Many opinions exist about how the crisis should be solved. One idea is to contain the problem by acting conservatively and not taking drastic actions, instead implementing gradual reforms. This would at best have a limited impact and would also lead to continued uncertainty in financial markets. Further erosion of confidence would continue pushing up borrowing rates. Many countries would be unable to pay debts or borrow enough to survive. The recession would only spread and deepen. A second option is to allow certain countries to default, but then manage their return to financial health. If Greece, Portugal, Ireland, or other smaller countries defaulted, a customized solution could be implemented to help each economy recover. But this approach is dangerous, as investors would suffer catastrophic losses, leading to a banking crisis of unimaginable proportions. Are you following the seriousness here? People are searching for a clear, strong hand. A third possibility is allow certain countries to voluntarily leave the euro or force them out. The intention would be to let them take their problems with them out of the Eurozone. But their problems would remain and would probably lead to currency devaluations and then collapse of their financial systems. This is because European economies have been deliberately interwoven to ensure reliance on one another, along with the strengthening of the Union. There is no real mechanism to force or let countries out. Some believe the EFSF should be increased for future bailouts of struggling countries. In fact, banks have already agreed to just write off half of Greece's debt. There will be more write-offs for other countries. Others believe since overspending caused the problem, the solution lies in offending countries adopting disciplined financial habits. They don't want more lending. They favor tough conditions applied before increasing loans. Germany and France are adamant that all struggling EU members must get their financial houses in order. Those who favor enforcing financial discipline also want more integration between nations. They want more Europe, not less. This enables greater monitoring. All solutions are painful, none are easy. In a December 2011 crisis summit, a major push toward integration changed Europe forever. Most member states gave up much of their sovereignty. Tax and spending plans must now be approved by the EU before their own governments do. Offenders will be automatically penalized. This was a huge step toward fiscal union. A two-speed Europe is in motion with two categories of EU membership. One is countries sharing the euro, those in the Eurozone. The other is those that have opted out of the euro. In December, EU members failed to fully agree on treaty changes, partly because Britain vetoed it. All 27 members must agree on every change. Britain's main concern was the proposed tax on financial transactions. Since London is the largest financial center in Europe, this tax would be a giant 50 billion euros every year. Banks and insurance companies would almost certainly leave London. Britain wanted an exemption. Germany and France objected. In the end, Britain's veto alienated it from the EU. The change was made as an intergovernmental treaty involving the 17 Eurozone members. Now a closer look at Germany's position, the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful economy in Europe. It has contributed the most to the bailouts of Greece, Portugal, and Italy. What the Germans think and do is crucial to Europe's destiny. Europe pivots around Germany. For some time, Germany has called for a new treaty with teeth to control member spending. Disputes would be decided by the European Court of Justice. Germany does not view bailouts as the answer. They fear that unbridled printing of money by the ECB will bring inflation. Think Weimar Republic and the hyperinflation of the 1920s. Germany is also against creating Eurobonds, where member debts are pooled and sold to investors. They don't want responsibility for other nations' debts. The average German hates seeing his hard-earned money support nations he sees as spendthrift, lazy, and unproductive. As the wealthiest economy in Europe, what Germany says matters. Financially stressed economies, desperate for more funds and bailouts, are looking to Germany for direction. They wait with bated breath on Germany's every word. Poland's foreign minister summarized Europe's dependence on Germany in a Berlin speech. I demand of Germany that, for your sake and for ours, you help the Eurozone survive and prosper. You know full well that nobody else can do it. I will probably be the first Polish foreign minister in history to say so, but here it is. I fear German power less than I'm beginning to fear German inactivity. Stunning words from a country that so recently suffered brutal German occupation. As European leaders scramble to stabilize their union, Germany holds the cards. How will they be played? Will a cataclysmic financial collapse occur? If so, then what? Will Europe completely collapse, simply implode, or will it survive and even thrive? Everyone has opinions, but only one source provides real answers. the Bible. God's Word has accurately predicted the rise and fall of empires for millennia. For example, it predicted the rise of the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman empires. It also foretold America and Britain's greatness. What does the Bible reveal about Europe? In Revelation 13, a mysterious beast is described. Let's read. I, the Apostle John, stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. This beast is the Roman Empire, the most powerful empire the world has ever seen. This is why it is shown as a terrifying beast, totally unlike anything before it. Revelation 17 also speaks of a beast. This one arises out of a bottomless pit and is ridden by a woman. This is the Holy Roman Empire, which was the Roman Empire after its fall in AD 476. The woman who rides it, called a whore, represents a great false church. The revived Roman Empire was given the title Holy Roman Empire because it was guided by this powerful church. This woman church is described as committing fornication, political relations with the kings of the earth. Ask, which church has ambassadors to many nations around the world? Which church is synonymous with nation state? The answer is obvious. The Holy Roman Empire was prophesied to go through 7 revivals. 6 have come and gone. These were led by Justinian, Charlemagne, Otto the Great, Charles V, and Napoleon, with the 6th revival culminating in Hitler and Mussolini. All 6 controlled Europe. One more revival is coming in our time. Read my booklets, Who or What is the Beast of Revelation, and Revelation Explained at Last. A very detailed, fuller picture of prophecy is carefully explained in my thorough book, The Bible's Greatest Prophecies Unlocked, A Voice Cries Out. You will want to read it. A 10-nation economic, political, and military combine will arise in Europe and shock the world. Led by Germany and more powerful than America, Russia, or China, it will control Europe and dominate all nations. At its helm will be 2 men, a mesmerizing false religious leader the Bible calls the false prophet, and a charismatic civil leader who represents the beast. This final union of church and state will bind Europe as never before. While many politicians strive to bind Europe through finance, most miss the historical pattern that religion has been the only glue capable of bringing diverse peoples together. A tiny few do see this pattern. One may ask, aren't most Europeans cynical and apathetic toward religion, or even atheist or agnostic? And how would an economic collapse unify Europe? The beast and false prophet are foretold to galvanize Europe through miracles. These will be world-shaking and not of God, but rather brought by Satan. The Bible calls them lying wonders. Watch for them. The false prophet will unify the masses behind religion, while the beast will solve the economic crisis. Together, they will take Europe from despair to incredible prosperity. This coming system is called Babylon the Great. Revelation describes its immense wealth. Let's read. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen, and purple and silk and scarlet, and ivory and vessels of most precious wood, and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors, and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat, and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots, and slaves and souls of men. Describing a return to the Roman practice of slavery, it concludes speaking of her fruits and dainty and goodly things which the masses, it says, lusted after. From the ashes of Europe's financial crisis, a superpower will arise. It will sit astride the entire world like a colossus, dominating global trade. Just before Christ returns, prophecy reveals Europe will become the center of the world. Watch Europe. By God's authority, I tell you, these things will happen. Until next time, this is David C. Pack saying, goodbye, friends.
This program was made available by Restored Church of God members and donors from around the globe. Explore our vast library of literature and other World to Come programs, which are all made available free of charge. To learn more or to find a local congregation, contact us to receive a personal response from a minister. The World to Come. The Restored Church of God presents David C. Pack, answering life's greatest questions straight from the Bible and announcing the wonderful good news of the world to come.
Events will soon unfold in Europe that will shake the world. A superpower will arise. Wielding enormous political, economic, and military power, it will challenge the world's greatest nations for global supremacy. 10 nations will combine to impose their agenda on an unsuspecting world. These will work in tandem with a great religious power. Where will this union come from? How will it operate? How will it work with the religious power? Is there European precedent? The answers will affect you. In fact, everything around you will change. Stay here. Watch this entire broadcast. The world is a dangerous place, and never more so than now. The threats of global terrorism, rogue nations, economic collapse, and nuclear proliferation are ever present, to name a few. There also exists a lack of leadership in the world. The United Nations is at best ineffective. America is in steep decline. Russia is rebuilding. China is rapidly emerging. The European Union is striving to integrate. No clear leader is evident. Seeing the void, Pope Benedict has called for a world political authority with real teeth, with power to enforce its rules upon all nations. Will this happen? What does Bible prophecy reveal? Pope John Paul II called for Europe to return to its roots, to recapture what made it great. Benedict repeated this. Many others have called on Europe to take the mantle of global leadership. For 500 years, Europe has played the leading role in shaping the world. The continent has produced matchless advances in science, business, education, agriculture, technology, art, architecture, and music. Think, monumental historical developments began in Europe before impacting other continents. The Renaissance, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and 2 world wars. The richest and most powerful nations in history have been European, or those founded by their descendants. In short, Europe has been the axis around which the world has revolved. And yet at this time, the continent is troubled, beset by problems of every kind. Economic stagnation, terrorism, illegal immigration, low birth rates, widespread crime, clashes of culture, and difficulties with integration, among others. The result? Europeans have become disenchanted with their leaders. In European Union elections, citizens showed their displeasure by voting out several center-left incumbents, in some cases installing right-wing extremists they would never have previously considered. Feeling their concerns are ignored, many are unhappy. Both the current and previous pope identified Europe's problems as spiritual. For over 1,000 years, religion has played the biggest role in shaping the continent. It has been the only glue capable, albeit always temporary, of galvanizing diverse cultures and competing national agendas. As problems multiply, Europeans are looking for direction, for someone with a map and compass to lead them out of their troubles and to provide real solutions. At the same time, the Vatican is concerned about the state of Europe and of the world. A strong leader is vital. Will one arise? What role will religion play? To answer these questions, it is crucial to first understand the 1,500-year relationship between Europe and the Vatican. In AD 324, the Roman Emperor Constantine, after seeing a vision, established Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Until that time, professing Christians lived under constant threat of persecution. Countless numbers were put to death, often in horrible fashion. In 325, Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea to settle doctrinal disputes. Most accepted its decrees. Those who did not were forced to flee for their lives, especially after the Council of Laodicea in 363 decreed Sunday as the official day of Christian worship, replacing God's seventh-day Sabbath. The church at Rome was now a key player in Europe's affairs. Over the next 300 years, its influence grew. In 476, however, the unthinkable happened. The powerful Roman Empire fell to barbaric German tribes. This colossal event rocked both Europe and the Vatican. After Rome fell, the papacy worked behind the scenes to eliminate the invaders. In 554, Justinian restored the empire as the Holy Roman Empire. This was significant. Holy was added to signify God's kingdom on earth. This began the Vatican's role as the most influential factor in selecting the emperor. From this time forward, the relationship of church and state would be the primary driver of European affairs. The emperor ensured the state carried out the church's wishes. In return, the church's support gave him credibility with the people. The Vatican was now the dominant player in Europe. The empire declined after Justinian's death in 565. Over the next 200 years, it would ebb and flow with successive rulers, never returning to its former glory. During the 8th century, a powerful Germanic Frankish kingdom emerged in France and Germany. In 732, the Franks rescued Europe from invasion by defeating the Muslim Saracens in a momentous victory at Tours, France. A grateful Vatican recognized the Franks as the defenders of Christianity. After the Frankish Emperor Pepin died in 768, his son Charles took the throne. He would become known as Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, or to the Germans, Karl der Grosse. Charles immediately undertook several military campaigns, successfully uniting Western Europe. Responding to a desperate plea for help from Pope Adrian I, Charles defeated the Lombards and in the process united Italy. After several victorious campaigns and a generous donation of land to the church, Charles was hailed as defender and guardian of the Christian faith. The alliance between the church and the Franks was strengthened. Charles' defining moment came in 800. Pope Leo III crowned him Imperator Romanorum, Emperor of the Romans. The crowning cemented the marriage between church and state and restored the Holy Roman Empire. Most significantly, it elevated the church above the secular power and showed the crown to be the Pope's to give and to take away. Another pope would later declare, "There must accordingly exist between these two powers, church and state, a certain orderly connection which may be compared to the union of the soul and body in man." So very telling. Europe fell into disarray after Charlemagne's death as foreigners continually invaded the continent. Time and again, the church and various governments were at loggerheads. Disunity reigned. Weakness in the church proved to be tied to weakness in Europe, and vice versa. Both awaited a leader to point the way forward. In 936, Otto the Great, son of a Saxon duke, came to power, having been elected by participants who raised their right hand and shouted, "Sieg und Heil," victory and salvation, similar to the Nazis. Otto then went about expanding his kingdom. The continent drifted into another period of decline. Pope John XII in 961 asked Otto to restore order and defend the church. Otto soon swept into Italy and defeated all enemies. The grateful pontiff crowned him Holy Roman Emperor. Once again, church and state moved together. Otto's kingdom was the beginning of what would be called the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. This was the First Reich, or empire. The Holy Roman Empire and Germany were now forever linked, with German leaders assuming the mantle of kingship with the imperial crown, the symbol of European unity, on their heads. Germany became Europe's power center. However, a struggle for power between church and state developed throughout the Middle Ages. Again, Europe declined. In the 11 and 1200s, Europeans launched unsuccessful crusades to take Jerusalem from the Muslims. In 1453, disaster struck. Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Muslim Turks. A shaky Europe desperately looked for a strong leader to lead it back to its proper place. In the 1500s, an influential Germanic family, the Habsburgs, came to prominence, having amassed huge swaths of land across Europe. Pope Clement crowned Charles V Holy Roman Emperor in 1530, making him defender of the faith. The Habsburgs, through marriages, were so connected with Spanish, Dutch, and other European royalty that Charles' empire stretched from Europe to South America. Through Charles' efforts, the Habsburgs controlled a vast global empire, the first of modern times. He proudly declared, "In my realm the sun never sets." Charles' goal was all Europe under one religion. This idea endured with the move toward a united Europe and religious ecumenism. With the ascent of the Habsburg Empire, many dreamed of a world-ruling Christian European empire. But with Charles' death, decline again set in. The 16 and 1700s would see the church struggle against threats to its power. These included the rise of Protestantism, the decline of the Spanish and Portuguese empires, conflict between France and Germany, and the emergence of the Ottoman Turks and Protestant Britain as formidable powers. So the church again awaited a leader to champion its cause. A star suddenly emerged in the late 1700s. Napoleon Bonaparte, a young, brash, but brilliant military leader from the French island of Corsica, burst onto the scene. By age 26, he was already commanding the French army in Italy, and by 30 had seized power in France. Ambitious, this student of Roman history dreamed of a resurrected Roman Empire with himself as emperor. He declared himself such in 1804 after snatching the imperial crown from the Pope's hand to crown himself. This goal accomplished, he set about unifying Europe. Napoleon saw many early successes, most notably the defeat of Prussia in 1806. However, one disastrous campaign after another eventually led to his defeat and downfall, first in Russia and then by the British at Waterloo. With his defeat in 1814, 1,260 years of the Holy Roman Empire came to an end. The Vatican had lost another champion. A period of rebuilding in Europe followed. By 1870, Giuseppe Garibaldi had reunited Italy. Otto von Bismarck reunited Germany the following year, calling it the Second Reich. Bismarck then forged an alliance with Italy, rekindling ties to the days of Charlemagne. In the 20th century, Benito Mussolini tried to revive the Holy Roman Empire. He reconciled a long-standing rift between church and state, and even entered into a concordat, an agreement, with the Vatican. But his reign was short-lived. It ended in abysmal failure with his public hanging in 1945. Adolf Hitler's visions of glory for now a Third Reich also failed. But the dream of European unity lived on. After World War II, the European Economic Community was established to improve trade between European nations. This later became the European Union, or EU. With the EU's 2009 ratification of the Lisbon Treaty, replacing the constitution that was struck down in 2005, a giant step was taken to establish the EU as an empowered and unified government, replacing a body of individual, sometimes squabbling member states. The treaty also created a much stronger president. This union has expressly stated that the goal for Europe is to create a world power. But Europe has many problems to overcome. Strong leadership is required. Surveying the scene, the Vatican is troubled by what it sees. In his book, Without Roots, the West, Relativism, Christianity, Islam, Pope Benedict, then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, described Europe as having denied its religious and moral foundation. He lamented a continent overtaken by secularism and materialism, a Europe that had slipped into immorality, cultural confusion, and irreligiousness. He saw a Europe in danger of being overrun by outside forces. Benedict has also lamented the weakening of European churches, telling a gathering of Italian priests, "There is no longer any evidence of the need for God, let alone Christ. The so-called great churches seem to be dying." Indeed, according to the Center for the Study on Global Christianity, every major religion in Western Europe is declining, except Islam. In 1900, almost every European professed Christianity. Today, only 3 out of 4 even identify with Christianity. The number who consider themselves non-religious shot up from less than 1% to 15%. In 12 major European cities, 38% say they never or rarely attend church. France at 60% is the worst. In areas of France, Sweden, and the Netherlands, non-attendance is over 90%. Such statistics threaten the church's very existence. And in a dramatic move, Benedict released a formal statement permitting practicing Anglicans to join the Catholic Church. On the 10th anniversary of the mutual declaration between the World Lutheran Federation and the Catholic Church, the Pope stated, "I sincerely hope that this important anniversary will help bring forward the path towards the full visible unity of all the disciples of Christ." This is a stunning development in Rome's call for every professing Christian, get this, to align with Catholicism. In addition, a Polish cardinal referred to the Pope as one who speaks like a prophet, quote unquote, when referring to the Pope's call for European unity. Prophet may in fact be a word heard more often in regard to the Pope. The Vatican sees a world of secular humanism, of no absolute morals, and devoid of strong leadership. Notice this from Benedict's June 2009 encyclical titled Charity in Truth. Quote, "In the face of the unrelenting growth of global interdependence, there is a strongly felt need for a reform of the United Nations organization, and likewise of economic institutions and international finance, so that the concept of the family of nations can acquire real teeth to manage the global economy, to revive economies hit by the crisis, to avoid any deterioration of the present crisis and the greater imbalances that would result, to bring about integral and timely disarmament, food security and peace, to guarantee the protection of the environment, and to regulate migration, For all this, there is urgent need of a true world political authority, as John the 23rd indicated some years ago. Such an authority would need to be regulated by law to observe consistently the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity, to seek to establish the common good, but ask by whose definition, and to make a commitment to securing authentic integral human development inspired by the values of charity in truth. Also ask, would he have in mind other than Catholic doctrine for such truth? Furthermore, such an authority would need to be universally recognized. Catholic means universal, and to be vested with the effective power to ensure security for all, regard for justice, and respect for rights. Again asked, defined by whom? Obviously, it would have to have the authority to ensure compliance with its decisions from all parties, and also with the coordinated measures adopted in various international forums. They also require the construction of a social order that at last conforms to the moral order. I repeat, defined by whom? To the interconnection between moral and social spheres. By every definition, this vision describes a world government based in Europe, endorsed by and in partnership with the Vatican. Therefore, to achieve such an alliance, the Vatican must find a powerful civil leader. History is the guide. Europe presently faces several crises. The continent is enduring its worst recession since World War II. Bank losses are projected to even exceed U.S. banks. Also, a staggering 20 million EU citizens are now unemployed. 1 in 5 are under age 25. Persistently high unemployment rates are translating into widespread crime, anger, depression, and feelings of hopelessness. Many are turning to extremism. The continent's social fabric is threatened. Immigration is another contentious issue. Large enclaves of immigrants now live in Europe's cities. Due to starkly different cultures and religions, these have not assimilated into traditional European cultures and have no intention of doing so, spawning an anti-immigration backlash. Many citizens fear losing their jobs and culture. This has led to frequent acts of violence in its capitals. Low birth rates are another serious concern. The lack of young workers brings a host of problems: imploding tax bases, collapsing pension plans, severe industry and military recruiting shortfalls, and inadequate care for the elderly. Political and business leaders are struggling with how to address these problems. Terrorism is another concern. This is fueled by wide-open borders and large immigrant populations. Age-old contentions with Islam are flaring up, especially as the big, fast-growing Muslim population becomes more prominent. Energy is also a concern. Europe relies primarily on the Middle East and Russia for its energy needs. The Middle East is a powder keg of instability. Russia is an unpredictable partner and historic enemy. Europe's energy supplies are by no means guaranteed. A possible energy cutoff looms large, a nightmare for Europe's leaders. Moves toward unification have continually met roadblocks, with constant bickering between member states. Integration remains a thorny issue. A major challenge has been integrating the newer member countries. Then there is the issue of integrating economies, made worse with the mix of fast and slow-growing ones. Also the Constitution. Even though it has been ratified, it has detractors. These are just a few of the challenges facing the continent. Both Europe and the Vatican seek a strong leader to address great challenges. The Bible is most clear that such a leader will arise. This man will galvanize and unite Europe. endorsed by and working with a powerful religious leader, he will usher in a time of unmatched prosperity. He will stun the world by reviving the Holy Roman Empire one final time. This man will institute a world political authority with very real teeth. A revitalized Europe will lead the world politically, industrially, financially, and militarily. It will one more time become the world's focus, the axis around which it revolves. Is this speculation? No. It is tomorrow's news written in advance, recorded in Bible prophecy. The Apostle John records in Revelation, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Beast is the term for a civil government or kingdom, and even for its leader. This beast symbolically represents the Roman Empire from its inception through its 7 historic revivals to its final resurrection in our time. John also speaks of a second 2-horned beast. "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him," the one just discussed, "and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. And he does great wonders, that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." This beast is also a government or kingdom, and it gives power to the first beast, the Roman Empire. It appears as a lamb, but speaks as a dragon. In other words, it is not what it seems. It is sinister and evil. This is crucial to understand. Most recognize that Christ is depicted in Scripture as a lamb, but Satan is always depicted as a dragon. Notice. "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world." So this second beast appears to be of God, but is really of the devil. Its 2 horns indicate it is not only a government, but also a church. Now ask, what religious organization is both a church and a government? The chilling answer should be plain if you have eyes to see. Notice this second beast gives power to the first, the Roman Empire. This has been happening since Justinian's crowning by the Pope in 554. Since that time, the 2 entities have always worked closely together. Roman emperors have acknowledged the supreme authority of religion throughout the empire. This will happen again. The growing influence of religion in the EU can be seen in Germany, where a recent High Court ruling mandated that businesses close on Sunday, the first day of the week, as a day of rest. Now recall what was decreed at the Council of Laodicea in AD 363, when Sunday keeping was enforced by law. Forgotten and lost is that God commanded the 7th day of the week, His Sabbath, be a day of rest, not the first. Watch the growing power of religion in Europe. The second beast of Revelation 13 will possess such seductive magnetism that it will be able to induce the world to worship the first beast, the Roman Empire, through extraordinary miracles. These will mesmerize the entire world, deceiving vast millions into worship of both the system and the man leading it. History will repeat itself. Soon, 2 men, one a civil leader, the other a religious leader, will revive the Holy Roman Empire in Europe. This power will return the age-old union of church and state. It will tower over every nation like a colossus, dwarfing all rivals, and it will enforce a mark involving disobedience to God. Those who fall in step with its edicts, who take its mark, will be temporarily spared, but soon after will be punished terribly by God. Most who refuse the mark will be horribly persecuted, tortured, and put to death. However, a few faithful of God's people are foretold to escape. This superpower will proclaim peace in our time, but will ultimately bring horrific destruction. Its attempt to institute a world political authority will ultimately fail, meeting a bitter end described in Revelation 18. After its demise, another world-ruling supergovernment will be established, and this one will succeed. This supreme authority, the kingdom of God, will also have real teeth, but it will bring true freedom, true and lasting peace, as well as true justice and prosperity for all. A qualified leader was long ago selected to lead it: Jesus Christ. Of His soon-coming worldwide reign, Scripture states, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon His shoulder. Of the increase of His government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon His kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever." The days of man's misrule upon the earth and of false religions deceitfully masquerading as being of God will finally be over. Peace, justice, and abundance will come at last to a world in desperate need of them. But these things will not come yet. You now know what must precede them: the bad news before the awesome good news. To understand more, much more about the astonishing events foretold to soon occur in Europe, you will want to visit our immense Library of Truth about prophecy at the rcg.org. That's the rcg.org. The book and booklet titles visible here are only the beginning. Also take time to view my broadcasts on the Book of Revelation, the New World Order, the Antichrist, the Beast of Revelation, the Last Days, and Is the End Near, among others on prophecy. No one else is explaining the truth about what lies ahead, never mind doing so in depth, and no one else will. May God help you understand all that you have just heard. Until next time, this is David C. Pack saying goodbye, friends.
This program was made available by Restored Church of God members and donors from around the globe. Explore our vast library of literature and other World to Come programs, which are all made available free of charge. To learn more or to find a local congregation, contact us to receive a personal response from a minister.